Welcome back to Behind the Play. My name is Alex Adams, and today we are joined by Arda Ocal, studio host for the NHL on ESPN and SportsCenter anchor. Thanks so much, Arda, for taking the time and coming on.
Alex, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. How are you?
Good, good. And I want to ask you a little bit about your career because I know you idolized and dreamt of being Ron MacLean one day. When did you first think you could become someone in the industry and work in sports media?
Very late in my life, honestly. I didn't even think it was a career possibility. Ron MacLean obviously was a studio host in Canada for Hockey Night in Canada and pretty much all NHL coverage. One of the legends of the industry in North America, quite frankly, but definitely in Canada, where I grew up watching him. I grew up in Toronto, and honestly, growing up, I didn't think that this would even be a job possibility. I had no friends or family in the industry. I just knew that it was a really cool job to talk about sports, and I just didn't really give it any second thought. I went to university, to college, and got a maths degree, which is almost the opposite of what a broadcaster would do, right? So I did that more so at the behest of my parents. Like, my parents were immigrants, and they didn't live an easy life, and they moved to North America, sort of like the North American dream, like many immigrants do, right? So I grew up with the availability, the possibility to dream, and so I got my degree. I had a desk job. I was a project manager for a few years, but what I realized was I wasn't really partying with my friends on the weekends like many people in their 20s do. I was more so going to the public access channel and trying to learn everything about television. And what I realized was I kind of love this and I would love to give it a try. And sort of, I guess that's where, doing the announcements in high school, doing the local radio station in college and the local newspaper, it always felt like a hobby until one day it didn't. And it just, I don't know, it just kind of switched in my head where I'm like, I should just really give this a try. So that's sort of how it happened, really.
And I know you started at the Score, and obviously there's Aftermath. That was such a great, program there. But how did you get started in the industry?
It was really so Rogers TV was a public access channel in just outside of Toronto in a city called Mississauga. And so I was there for a long time. I volunteered. They needed people to drive to local community events. So I said, let me do this in exchange. Let me just hang around the studio, just learn as much as I can. So that's what I did. And eventually, maybe a couple years, maybe it was a year. I don't remember the time frame, but it was quite some time after I started volunteering. They held open auditions, and I decided to audition. And so they liked what they saw enough to put me on random shows. So I just filled in here and there. And then I got my start on the OHL, doing Brampton Battalion games. They were a team in the OHL back in the day. They moved to North Bay since, but they were in Brampton then. And so I did several seasons of that. And that was just you just go through the motions. Like, you just do, you fill every role on those broadcasts. One day I would be a host. The other day I would be a color commentator of all things. The next day, play-by-play. The next day, sideline reporting. Like, it was just whatever need was available or whatever need that was required to be filled, you just did it. And at that point, and still today to an extent, honestly, like my mantra and the mantra of successful people in broadcasting, many of them are just don't say no to anything, just say yes to everything, and it'll work itself out. If you have the passion and you have the desire and also the work ethic to just make it work, it's going to work. So that's what I did. I just said yes to everything, and I hosted a bunch of shows. I even hosted a daily talk show for a while. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of experience. It was really good at that point in my career. The pay wasn't great, but I wasn't expecting it to be, like that. I was just trying to get experience, and I was happy to be in front of the camera and sort of, get some reps. And that's really where it was probably like mid-20s where I was finally like, I think I need to make a decision here. Like, I saved my money enough doing the project management work that I couldn't struggle. Like, if I want to give this a try and do it for a couple of years, then at least I wouldn't struggle, I wouldn't be lavish or anything, but like I could get by and I could eat and I could have a roof over my head. And, that's really about it. But like, I could do it if I really wanted to. And I made that decision. So I quit my job, went full time, and, luckily doors opened for me along the way.
And with that, you alluded a little bit to hosting, and I wanted to ask, you've hosted so many shows, as you've said. What are some of the keys in being a good host and broadcaster, and maybe what is your process when preparing to host a show?
The big key, especially when I'm hosting a game broadcast, is it's not about the host. It's always about the analyst in the game. It's
Okay.
always about the game that you're talking about, and it's always about the analysts, especially during intermission reports. The analysts should shine. They are the ones that more often than not played the game, and they're the ones that the audience wants to hear from in terms of the game they're watching. So you as a host, me as a host, I'm doing my best work when either I'm barely noticed or I'm guiding the conversation as best as possible and putting my analysts in position to succeed. So that's the big thing that I always have in mind. And building a rapport, building that chemistry is very good, because at the end of the day, it is entertainment. You are on television and people are watching to be entertained. That's why we watch sports, because it's fun, right? So you have to keep that in mind as well. And preparation is a big one too. The more you prepare, here's the thing: as you prepare for shows, there are many shows where I don't get to at least half or maybe even 3/4 of what I prepared.
Wow.
And that's fine, because I have it in my head, I have it on my notes, and that's okay. I would way rather be in a position where I'm over prepared than under prepared. If I'm on camera and I have nothing to say, that's a way worse position to be in than if I have too many things to say and I have to decide what's more important to say in the moment. So I would say those things come to mind based on the question you asked.
And with that, I want to ask, what advice would you give to young journalists in the industry? I know you've said before, like getting reps and learning the industry, but what do you think is maybe the most important thing for a young journalist, a sports journalist coming up in the industry?
Yeah, like it's never been easy. The barrier to entry to create content and to be consistent with your content has never been more low. Like there was no YouTube or no social media when I was breaking into the industry. So there was really not that many places that you could post content or reports or whatever the case may be. So now you can be as consistent as you want. What I find is, like, let's say people start a podcast early in their careers, they get burnt out or they get discouraged because the podcast doesn't get that many listens or that many views. To me, that's not the way to look at it, especially early in your career. Sure, the possibility exists for it to go viral, to pop off, whatever, and that's great. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't matter. What really matters is the consistency and building the foundations, and quite frankly, putting a reel together so you can pass it along to hiring managers and whoever else. So be diligent, find mentors, find people who you can pick their brains. Here's the other thing: like when they say that you have to have thick skin in this business. Like you hear that a lot, right? You got to have thick skin in broadcasting, thick skin in media. To me, a lot of that has to do with the fact that you're just going to hear no a lot. Like there aren't that many people in broadcasting that have heard yes more than no, or their path has been easy. Those stories are few and far between. They do happen, and unfortunately, a lot of people compare themselves as they're going through it to those people. And quite frankly, like life isn't fair in a way, right? Like not everyone is going to have the easy path to what they want, kind of thing. I certainly didn't. It took me years and years and years to get to any sort of comfort. And when I say comfort, it's not really truly comfort. I mean like somewhere where I feel like, okay, I can do this full time, kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
and so to me, the thick skin comes in understanding that a no doesn't mean a permanent no. It just means not now. And knowing how to be resilient in those situations and having a good support system that will pick you up when you're down on certain days and things like that. So, like it's always be persistent, be pleasant, be a good person too. That's a big thing. Like one of the biggest pieces of advice I give is that this industry is smaller than you think. So be a kind person, be a joy to work with, be fun, because you never know who you'll meet on the way up and the way down, and who you'll be working with wherever you may be. And that's just a good life lesson, right? Let's just be good. Like it's just, we need more good in the world. So just be a good human.
Totally. I completely agree. I think you said that really well. And on the point of being fun, I'm going to ask you a fun question. And I asked your friend, Greg Wyshynski, of which you guys share the drop, which everyone should check out as well at ESPN. But If you were Arda, if you were the NHL commissioner for one day, what rule would you change?
What rule would I change? Oh, there's so many rules that I would consider. I would probably see. You know what I would do? I would take the exhibition or the preseason games, and
Yeah.
I would just change like certain rules every year. I'd be like, all right, let's see what happens when if there's no offsides. Just eliminate offsides entirely. What happens? Let's see if people like ties again instead of shootouts. What happens there? Let's see if we eliminate icing. Like, I like where hockey is. Hockey is exciting. I find that maybe certain rules like I wonder about reviews. Like people often complain about like the length of reviews and whatnot. Like, is it better to be completely right, or does it take the essence of it away based on like looking at a millimeter or like a quarter of an inch if someone is offside or whatever the case may be. Like, I would probably point to those things first and experiment with it. But to be honest with you, I would probably focus on the technology side of things way more. Like, one of the coolest things we did this year at ESPN was the Big City Greens co-broadcast, where there was a game right on ESPN, but then on ESPN2, the same game was happening in the Big City Greens universe. So it was all cartoon, and it was tied to the game. It was like puck tracking technology. Like, I thought that was awesome. And
Yeah.
I would probably, if it were me, I'd be like, all right, let's try this for what other Disney properties can we apply this to? Like, if it were me, I'd probably, if I was commissioner, I'd be like, yeah, let's do that. I don't know anything. I'm not in these conversations, but if I were the boss, I'd probably be like, this was great, and so let's, if we could do more of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I want to ask you a little bit about some Canadian teams. Obviously, I want to start off with, you're from like the GTA. What do you make of the Leafs right now going into the off season? And what would you do if you were Brad Treliving? Would you keep the Core-4? Would you trade them all? What would you do?
Yeah, I think Brad Treliving has an interesting year ahead of him. He comes in at a really crazy time for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They finally win a series. They don't go much farther past that. They win one game against the Panthers, and now Austin Matthews has a year left on his deal. I thought the hiring of Shane Doan was an interesting one as a special advisor. Maybe that has, does it have all to do with the fact that Shane Doan was Austin Matthews' favorite player growing up? Maybe they have a kinship. Maybe there's some sort of connection there. Probably not, but Shane Doan, like, I think a lot of people might point to that because it's an obvious connection to make. But Shane Doan has been really involved with the Coyotes in the front office. So this is a good, logical step up for Shane Doan, as somebody who might aspire to be, doing bigger and better things in NHL front offices. This is a great move. And Brad Treliving is somebody with a lot of experience. And like, people forget, like, that trade, like, it seems like Florida won the trade because they're in the Stanley Cup final right now, right?
Yeah.
But the Calgary Flames finished 1 point ahead of the Panthers in the regular season. It's just they were in a conference where they just happened to miss the playoffs due to math. And the Florida Panthers barely squeaked into the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
In a chip in a chair scenario. So I think Brad Treliving is a good hire. I think the whole Kyle Dubas, Brendan Shanahan, Toronto Maple Leafs saga was a pretty interesting one as well. And here's the thing, like, to me, Kyle Dubas leaving, I think he wanted, like, as it has been reported, he wanted complete autonomy in his decisions. And perhaps he felt that he wasn't going to be able to get that in Toronto. Now, look at the job titles. He said he doesn't want to be a general manager elsewhere in the league, but he's the president of hockey operations of the Pittsburgh Penguins, right?
Yeah.
So, like, the context of that quote that is circled around social media, the context that you're getting from the clips that are being put out the most are, oh, I'm not going to show up anywhere, period. But I think the vibe of it really was, I don't want to be a GM anywhere else in the league. I think what he really had his heart set on was being the leader, like what Brendan Shanahan was. And maybe Brendan Shanahan didn't want to relinquish control of that. And so, Kyle Dubas then sees an opportunity with the Penguins, and he becomes president of hockey operations. And maybe he now will have that autonomy or that final say, or at least give the GM, whoever the GM will be for the Penguins, the blessing to have that autonomy to create that relationship there. So in terms of the Core-4, I think that I mean, they're all great players. I think goaltending is a question that you look at and you say, yep, Ilya Samsonov was good. Is this somewhere that we need to take a look at? Like, Matt Murray was injured, obviously. Joe Wall stepped up when he needed to. Do we need to look at defense and add a couple pieces? I think the Ryan O'Reilly piece was a really good one. He came in clutch in the playoffs. He had that grit. He knew how to win. He was a Conn Smythe winner, obviously, with St. Louis. So I think there's still a lot of positives there. But at the end of the day, Toronto is not truly going to be happy until this team wins another Stanley Cup. And there's a lot of fans that think that this team should be in contention every year, and it just hasn't gotten there thus far.
Yeah, no, for sure. As a Sens fan, I'm not on that wagon. I don't want that to happen, but it'll definitely be an interesting offseason to see what they do. And I want to go to the Sens because you've been very funny on social media. I saw your Ryan Reynolds tweet a couple days ago about the sale of the Sens. What do you make of the ownership and the chaos that it seems in the sale of the team, and maybe how bright do you see the future for the Ottawa Senators going forward under a new owner?
Well, I mean, I thought Ryan Reynolds was the perfect choice. You know, look what he's done with Wrexham. He literally has the Midas touch in terms of content, and clearly he has a proven model and a proven success story with Wrexham and what he's been able to do with that. I thought that he would have been fantastic for the league, and owning the Senators. Like, Wrexham was literally a team that only Wrexham fans would have known.
Yep.
And now the world knows that. And the Ottawa Senators could have been very similar. And I'm not saying that as a dig to Ottawa. I used to live in Ottawa. I worked in Ottawa
cool.
when I was with the Weather Network. I was there for several months. And I that's not what I mean. What I mean is Ryan Reynolds just knows how to make things pop on a global scale. Like, Wrexham is now a tourist destination. I've talked to people at Wrexham that live there, and they tell me that people just from around the world visit the town, and they go to the places they see on the show. Like, they go to that canteen, the mobile restaurant that's outside the race course, and they go to the stadium, and they go to the pub that's in the show. Like, it's become a global destination, and Ottawa, with Ryan Reynolds' sort of magic touch, could certainly have become that as well, or even to a larger scale. I like the celebrity interest. I think that that's always interesting and important. There were already billionaires involved anyway, so I wasn't really concerned about like the money bids because there were so many. What I am concerned about, and I don't think it's going to draw out too much longer, maybe a few weeks, but there are some bids that they've just closed up because they're frustrated with the process. And so, you know, what does that mean for the other bids, and where will we go with all of this? So whatever the case may be, I'm interested in the final number because, you know, in some reports, it went up to $1 billion.
I saw over.
And that might have been, and that might, I mean, let's be honest, like that could also be just due to the sheer number of applicants and the celebrity involvement that usually bumps up the number because a lot more people are reading about it and know about it. But it'll be interesting to see who ends up with it.
No, for sure. And like, I know you're talking about people going to Wrexham. Like, a friend of the show, Ian Mendez, went to Wrexham as part of the piece, and that day it's announced that Ryan Reynolds got out of the race. So just even people in Ottawa are just so drawn to it, and it sucks that and it's a shame that it didn't work out. But I want to go to the Stanley Cup Finals. Obviously, you're covering it for ESPN. What have you thought of the series so far, and how exciting has the hockey been for you in your mind?
Hockey's been very exciting. Storylines have been great. I love the Florida Panthers story, the underdogs. They knock off the greatest regular season team in NHL history. They knock off the team that hadn't been to the Cup final since 1967. Then they beat arguably the best defensive team in the league. Like, there's a lot of storylines. And like, all the teams they're facing, was it like 3 of the top 5 point getters in the regular season? I think
you're right.
Like, that, it's just insane. They're just not destroying, but they're like, they've had a really difficult path, and they're, you know, earning their victories, and they deserve to win. So even game 3, man, like they were down with minutes to go, and you're just like, they can't do it again, can they? And then there's Matthew Tkachuk in front of the net in his office, and he just, it's just unbelievable. And the best part about Matthew Tkachuk is that he embraces the attention, and he's getting interviewed by People Magazine, and he's on the NBA TNT set. He's in demand, which is amazing for the sport. So I just love to see it. For Vegas, totally opposite, right? Like, they were in the playoffs for pretty much all the season. They were in a playoff position all season long. Like, was it 89% or something ridiculous? Like a really high number. They've only been in the league for 6 seasons, and they've been to the Stanley Cup final twice, and they've only missed the playoffs once, and they've been to the conference final 4 times. And it's like they already have like 9 or 10 players that have scored a goal in the final. Like, it's just incredible. And Jack Eichel's first Stanley Cup final, and after his whole saga with Buffalo, he's having a lights out year. It's just there's so many great storylines to follow. So I've had a lot of fun covering the playoffs, and definitely the final as well.
Did you have a pick going into the series, and who do you think will win? Today we're recording it right before Game 4 tonight.
I think Vegas still closes it out, but if Florida wins this game, it'll be incredible. I mean, it'll best of 3, then all bets are off, because they even the series, even though like after games 1 and 2, it was a demolition by Vegas, especially game 2. So if Florida win this game, then all bets are off, and it's just, you got to believe in the Panthers at that point, right? Like, it's just incredible what they're doing.
If Florida comes back, is it Bob or Tkachuk for Conn Smythe in your mind?
If Florida comes back and Bobrovsky stands, I think it depends on how many goals Tkachuk scores versus the performances that Bobrovsky has. And that's the other thing. That's a good point that you just made there. So going into the final, there were so many candidates for Conn Smythe, right? Like, on both sides. Like, if Adin Hill, Jack Eichel, Jonathan Marchessault, Matthew Tkachuk, Sergei Bobrovsky, even throw Connor Verhaeghe in there, even on the outskirts, like Brandon Montour, like, there were like a lot of names that you were like, if they have a good final, they will definitely, they're at least in the conversation. It was like a embarrassment of riches. Like, it was just so many people that were having awesome off seasons that you were like, yeah, I can see this happening, So, I mean, Marchessault's in the lead right now, but like, to your question though, I think it would, like, if Tkachuk has a hat trick in a game and he scores another game winner, like, it's tough to bet against him, right? But if Bobrovsky has like 2 shutouts, then it's tough to bet against him, right? I think that's how tight the race is. If the Panthers were to win.
Yeah, my question is just if Tkachuk scores the game-winning goal, but Bobrovsky stands on his head, what happens? That feels like they maybe a Conn Smythe in that case.
Can you imagine? That'd be hilarious. A Conn Smythe winner. Wow.
I don't think it's ever happened.
Yeah, I mean, is it even allowed? I don't even know if that's a rule or not, if it's like you can't have 2. But I would say this. I feel like the tie would go to the runner. So like Tkachuk would win in that situation, maybe only because I guess a game-winning goal is flashier than making 40 saves, but like, and again, I'm not diminishing either performance. If in this scenario, I'm not diminishing either performance. I'm just saying, I feel like a game-winning goal, like, that's what people grow up dreaming of doing, right? If you were to score a game-winning goal in overtime, to win the Stanley Cup or whatever, like, I feel like that's so ingrained in people's, fantasies growing up, wanting to be a hockey player, that like, it's tough to bet against that,
Oh, I'm just thinking in my mind of a Game 7 overtime winner, and I'm thinking how crazy whatever that celebration would be like. But I want to ask you quickly before I let you go. Obviously, you're at ESPN. How good do you think it is for hockey that it's 2 traditional markets in Vegas and the Florida Panthers in the finals? Is that good for hockey in your mind?
Yes, I do. I think that I mean, look, I grew up in Canada, so obviously I always have love, and for the longest time, I always viewed hockey under the slant of Canada. So like, when I see people, when we see the news about Arizona, for example, and the possibility of that team moving, and a bunch of Canadian hockey fans saying, well, go to Quebec City or have another team in Toronto. I completely understand that vibe. I understand where they're coming from. I also understand that putting a second team in Toronto, though it would dramatically increase hockey-related revenue, it wouldn't necessarily create an extra hockey fan.
Yeah.
And nor would it in Quebec City, right? So I get those arguments completely. And honestly, where I sit, like, to put a team in Houston or Kansas City or Utah or Salt Lake City or wherever, or to put a second team in Toronto, to me, I'm still going to watch, like, me personally, I'm still going to watch hockey no matter where the team is, right? Like,
yeah.
So I understand both sides. I understand the arguments made. And for me, I love that the cities have embraced the cup runs. And I hope that just continues, even if lean years are to come. I hope that the fans continue to support the teams. Like, I'll use Columbus as an example. Like, the Blue Jackets did not have a great year, but there was still a really good contingent of fans that would go to games because the vibe was good. Like, I saw it firsthand. Not every game was sold out, but like, there was still a really good vibe and the fans, an optimism there. And so, you know, that's what I like to see. I like to see that when markets are full of passionate fans and, you know, that grew over the years organically, whatever the case may be. So that's what I would say about that.
Well, Arda, thanks so much for taking the time, especially just in such a busy time for the NHL and the Stanley Cup Finals for you. So I really appreciate it. And I just want to give you the floor. Is there anything at ESPN or anything else that you want to plug going forward that people should keep their eyes and ears open for?
Thanks for having me, Alex. No plug for me. Just thanks for watching. Whatever, whether you're watching in the crease or the point or the drop or our game coverage, whatever the case may be. Just thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. And very kind of you to have me on the show, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arda. I really appreciate it. And good luck with the finals. And hopefully it goes to 7 and maybe we have Matthew Tkachuk scoring a game 7 winner. So let's
Game 7 overtime.
Yeah.
And then right before it'll be like Sergei Bobrovsky makes the save of the playoffs, like even better than the Aiden Hill save in game 1. It's going to be like the save of the playoffs. And then Tkachuk is going to score. And then we're going to be looking at each other like, well, who wins Conn Smythe now? Because they both just made like insane plays.
Yeah, and it's in overtime, both of them, and then that goes down the ice.
But,
like
right.
Like 30, like that World Junior McTavish goal from like I think was it last summer or the summer before? Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like game 7. I think
Bedard,
that'd be perfect.
The semifinal. Yeah, the Bedard semifinal where he goes to the entire team.
Exactly.
Didn't that come off a good save too? I feel like that came off.
I think so. I don't think it was an open net batted out of midair, but I think it was a nice save. I think you're right about that.
Yeah. Anyway.
Anyways, well, thank you so much, Arda, and best of luck for the rest of the finals. And thanks so much for doing this.
You too. Thank you.